Episode 61, An Angel. Aria got irritated when she heard about what happened to Iris last night. The reason for her annoyance was that she was trying to look good in front of other people by helping them out in their time of need. But on the other hand, Aria was too shaken up from that attack and had locked herself in her bedroom. She ran to the underground shelter when she heard about the monster attack and stayed there with the others. She had been staying in her bedroom, recovering from the shock, but out there, Iris was trying to play Luna with everyone. She was glad that someone snapped at her and put her in her place, but the fact that she helped them didn't sit well with her. Therefore, today she forced herself to get out of bed and helped around the tent, though she was so reluctant to look after these people, and she had been talking about how Iris didn't come today because Ovid had made her pretense fall. However, they said Iris's absence was because the Alpha ordered her to go to the mines. And here she was again.
What are you doing here?
Aria approached her with long strides, her eyes ablaze with anger at the sight of Iris.
Who do you think you are to be here?
Iris flinched when she was reprimanded openly in front of so many people. She didn't like to be the center of attention, especially in this kind of situation.
Go away,
Aria said loudly and viciously.
Nobody wants you here.
She looked around her and was satisfied because she had gathered a lot of attention.
Do you really think that by helping us now you can make us like you?
Iris looked around her, and the fierce gazes that they sported her made her panic. So much hatred and hostility radiated from them, and she found herself hyperventilating. In order to not escalate the situation, Iris decided to go from the scene. She came here because she wanted to help them, but it seemed her presence was not welcomed at all. However, that was a wrong move, since Aria didn't want to let it slide. She got the audience and the attention that she wanted. This was a perfect place to humiliate her. If she couldn't torture her, at least she could make people hate her even more. They needed to remember how they lost their families and how their lives were in the past 10 years.
I am not done yet.
Aria grabbed her arm and turned her around. Her grip was so strong. She was a shifter after all. Thus, it was not easy to free herself from her.
Do you really think you are the Luna now, and you are trying to act like one? Do you really think we have forgotten what your father had put us through the last 10 years? How many times do we have to grieve like this because our family, friends, and mates were killed by your cold-blooded father and brother?
Aria knew how to stir the situation. She rode the grievances of the people here, who lost their precious ones during the attack a few nights ago, and channeled it to their former hatred and grievances of what they had to endure, the unfairness and abuse that they suffered under the hands of Alpha Gerald and Mason, also the 5 Alphas. It didn't take long before the situation became so tense as they started cursing at Iris. They vented out their sadness, sorrow, and hardships on her, since it was easier for them to have someone to blame for all the misfortunes that they had to suffer. And Iris was the perfect target.
She is pretending to be nice to you because she wants to get your sympathy. Do you really think she's doing that out of the kindness of her heart?
Aria felt enthusiastic to feel the negative emotions from the people around her. She could use this to make them rally behind her.
Do you really believe that she has kindness in her heart? She is the daughter of Alpha Gerald, the very same person that enslaved us for a decade.
Iris tried to free her hand from Aria's grip, but she was too strong, and she felt like she bruised her wrist by now with how strongly she held her. But then, she felt sharp pain on her shoulder. She shrieked and found out someone had hurled a rock at her.
Your father killed my mate.
A young man glared at Iris. He was the one who had hurled the rock at her.
How can you still be alive and well?
And then another rock hit Iris's forehead this time.
Your brother killed my son!
And that one reaction caused a series of reactions from the people around them as they did the same thing. They picked up rocks and hurled them at Iris. Seeing how the situation escalated, Aria felt ecstatic. Her eyes were so bright when she finally took a step back and watched how people around them hurled rocks at Iris while shouting their grievances. They were not mentally stable, as they had to lose their family members or had their precious ones injured. Thus it was easy to provoke them and make them direct their hatred at Iris.
Your brother raped my daughter!
Your father killed my entire family. You should have died along with your father.
Go to hell with your wicked father!
You are a useless bitch. You should be whipped until you die.
I don't want to breathe the same air as you. You will never be our Luna.
Even after your father died, he still tortured us. You are not a Luna for me. Go to hell.
Why should you torture the Alpha by making him take you as his Luna? You don't deserve him.
You should be courted like what your father did to my father.
There were so many insults and curses that were thrown at Iris, but there were more rocks that were hurled in her direction. Iris wanted to leave the scene as she felt blood oozing out from her head, but someone would pull her back to the center of their attention again. They would kick her and throw more rocks at her. Her body was in so much pain, she was barely able to breathe as she curled herself on the ground. And when she felt someone kick her stomach so hard, she wanted to vomit her guts.
Go die! All the people here will be happy to see you die.
Iris couldn't even cry for help. Her ears were ringing and her whole body was aching so badly. Someone even stepped on her fingers and used their heels to crush them. The pain was unbearable. She came here to help, but why did they hate her so much for something that she didn't do? Hannah went to fetch a bucket of cold water when she heard a commotion from afar, but she didn't hasten her steps because she was carrying the bucket.
Let me help you.
Will suddenly came over and then carried the bucket for her.
Oh, you don't need to do that.
Hannah politely rejected his advances and immediately tried to get the bucket back, but Will insisted.
It is fine. You are helping people here. I should be able to help too.
You are the Alpha's personal guard. You are already helping enough by protecting the Alpha because the Alpha will protect his people.
Hannah said, but she didn't try to take back the bucket because Will made it clear that he would be the one to carry it over. Both of them were walking side by side toward the tent now. Though there was a commotion near the tents, they chatted a little bit because they didn't think much of it.
Why are you here? I thought you were with the Alpha.
He and Adoran would be often seen with the Alpha, and now Adoran was out of the pack. Will should stick to Alpha Kane, right?
The Alpha is in his bedroom. He ordered me to call for you, Missy.
Will replied. Somehow they slowed down their steps to have a longer conversation with each other.
But Miss Iris went with Gamma Ethan this morning to the mining site.
Yes, I've been there, but Gamma Ethan said that he had sent her back an hour ago. I checked in her room, but she didn't return there. I saw you, so I thought you would know where she is.
Hannah gave some thought to it before she remembered where her Missy could be.
I think she's in the tent. She must have arrived when I went to fetch the water. That's why I didn't see her.
Why is she in the tent?
Will frowned. As far as he knew, the tents were filled with the victims of the attack and the dead bodies of the warriors and villagers who died during the attack.
She is helping there.
Helping?
Hannah threw him a look and then sighed deeply.
You will not believe me even if I said that she helped the warriors who were poisoned by Brine Talon's venom. She changed their bandages and wiped their bodies so their fever wouldn't go too high.
What? She did that?
This time, Hannah was annoyed. She let her annoyance slip through her tone.
Yes, she did that, and yes, she is kind. She is nothing like her father and brother.
Will was having a hard time believing that, and for Hannah, it was a normal reaction she got every time she told someone how different Iris was from her father and brother. They would stop mocking and cursing at Iris in front of her, but it didn't stop them from hating her for her father and brother's sins. And now, seeing how upset Hannah was, Will tried to change the conversation. He would see it for himself whether Iris was there to help or not, though he was still skeptical about that.
I have not yet thanked you for what you have done for me that night.
Will said. He looked a little bit awkward, because he didn't know how to phrase his words nicely. That night, Hannah knew what night that he was talking about because that was the first time she met him.
You don't need to thank me.
Hannah said timidly as she lowered her head.
I didn't do much.
No, you did so much, or else I will not be here talking to you now.
Will then continued.
I remembered that was the best food that I have ever eaten.
He chuckled wryly.
And if it was not for your medicine, I would have died. I'm so grateful to you that you found me.
Your words are heavy.
That night was the night when Will was raped by 10 savages. He could barely stay alive at that time, and just like what he said, if it was not for Hannah, who found him half dead that night and brought medicine for him, he would have died, because he was bleeding so much and didn't have any strength. Nor did he intend to strive to be alive.
No, I still remember you crying and telling me that everything will be all right. The slavery will end soon, and I need to be strong because the Alpha is still fighting the bad Alpha.
Will remembered what she said vividly, as if it happened yesterday.
You told me to not give up.
Hannah was stunned. She barely remembered what she said that night, because it was only a cliché thing and words of empty motivation. The only thing in her mind at that time was she needed to keep him alive.
I was so hopeless and no longer wanted to live. It was a miracle that I could pull through that night.
Will then turned his head and then looked at Hannah warmly.
And that miracle came in the form of you.
Hannah lowered her head even more, feeling bashful, but also uncomfortable.
You looked like an angel to me at that time.
Episode 62.
Step forward. Will was 21 at that time, and they were in the 5th year of slavery when Gerald and Mason had this brilliant idea to let 10 savages rape him. They reenacted what they had done to Ethan 2 years prior. He still remembered how those savages touched him and got their pleasure from his body over and over again. He lost count how many times he lost consciousness, only to wake up to them doing the deed without stopping. If it was not for his good constitution, he would have died during the process, as they used his body as they pleased and didn't hold back at all. However, at that time, he wished he had died. He wished the suffering would end that night. Will still remembered how he heard Gerald and Mason laughed at him among the labored breathing of the savages when they reached their climax by using his body. It was something that he would never forget. A nice gift from Gerald for his lifetime. The most frequent event that would haunt him when he had his nightmares. When he woke up again after he fell unconscious a few times, the savages were long gone. But he found himself in a pool of his own blood. His entire body was in so much agony. Yet, at the same time, he felt numb. All of his will to survive had been depleted. They said it would just be another death. They should have gotten used to this by now. That was all he was thinking. He was just another death that night. And that was when Hannah came. She came with water, food, and medicine, and by some miracle, he survived. Will always remembered her, though he didn't see her often, but every time she was around, he would always have his eyes on her. He also knew that sometimes she would sneak food to the other slaves and wished she wouldn't get caught, or she wouldn't get into trouble for that. That was only one of the many things Hannah had done for him, for them. Though Hannah was not the only one, but for him, because of that particular night, his heart always beat faster when he saw her. He would always have his eyes on her. Will spoke very gently with his eyes fixed on her.
You looked like an angel.
And that's too much. I'm glad that I can be of help for you. Hannah was blushing. She lowered her head, but the gratitude shouldn't be for her alone.
You told me to not give up.
Will lowered his head as well. The tips of his ears turned red. He wasn't used to having such heartfelt conversations.
And I'm right?
Hannah grinned.
You are right. Thank you.
Will smiled at her. This time he looked her in the eyes before she avoided his gaze. However, someone came to Hannah. She was a young lady who worked under Grilla in the tent. She was panting badly before she grabbed Hannah's hand tightly. "What is it?" Hannah frowned and Will was on alert. When someone came to you with such an expression, it would never entail good news. "Your miss! She's being hit by rocks by the people!" Ami shrieked when she watched what the people were doing to Iris. She was about to intervene, but Arya pulled her back.
No, don't do that.
Arya said in a warning tone.
What do you mean, don't do that? She will die if we leave her like that.
Ami tried to brush off her hand that held her back, but Arya didn't let her go. She tightened her grip instead.
No, Ami, we can't intervene. People will despise you if you take her side.
Grilla chimed in as she tried to stop Ami from going further.
They are angry with her. They will get angry at you too. Are you crazy? She is our Luna now. You know how important she is for this pack.
Ami didn't think of her value as a Luna, but how it would affect their pack if she died. After all, the only thing that could preserve the Blue Moon pack was the fact that she was the Alpha's mate.
But you can't go there and put yourself in danger.
Grilla reminded her frustratedly. She didn't like the sight, thus she turned her head away to not look at it. But she didn't find it in her to help Iris either. What Arya said was right. It was so strange for her to come and help. She was reluctant to do so. She herself was also holding a grudge against the Lane family. Seeing how Arya and Grilla stopped her, Amay second-thought her decision to interfere because the pressure was too high, even when she knew it was not right to stone her to death. She was unable to go against them. It was easier to go with the majority. Therefore, Ami didn't do anything as she averted her gaze, trying not to look at the scene before her eyes. So did Grilla, while Arya enjoyed what was happening in front of her. She was sure that these people would kill her. She hoped she would die now, so she didn't need to deal with her anymore. She could get rid of her and be the only woman by Kane's side. How dare she come between her and the Alpha? Iris didn't know what kind of hardship that they had gone through together and what kind of things she had done for Kane. She wouldn't let that slide and give the position of Kane's woman to Iris, who knew nothing of hardship. She didn't deserve him. However, all of them stopped all of a sudden when they heard someone scream furiously before they saw Hannah rush over. She shielded Iris's body with hers as she glowered at the people around her.
What do you think you are doing?
She screamed so loud her face turned red. She was visibly distraught at the sight of Iris, who was bleeding profusely. Why was she always the one who got hurt?
How dare you hurt her? How dare you hurt her?
They were stunned to see Hannah's outburst and lowered their heads. This was the first time for them to see a furious Hannah. She had never raised her voice at all and would always talk gently to them, even when she disagreed with their statements that Iris was a bad person and was no different from her father. Behind Hannah, Will came over and checked on Iris. She was badly injured. They could only hear a soft whimper from her lips, while her eyes were tightly shut.
Leave her alone! Leave her alone! How dare you hurt her?
Hannah screamed at them furiously. Dread filled her body at the sight of Iris as horror danced in her eyes.
What do you think you're doing?
Tears streamed down her cheeks. She felt her heart being squeezed painfully. The crowd before her muttered something under their breath, but they indeed moved away from Iris.
Don't be like that, Hannah. We're grateful for what you have done to us, but you can't shield a monster like her.
One of the people among the crowd had the audacity to speak to the frantic Hannah.
You are all the monsters!
Hannah screamed back at whoever had called her Missy a monster. Her vision got blurred from her tears. She couldn't describe what she felt right now. This was even worse than when Mason whipped her. The crowd gasped. They were all frowning. They thought Hannah had taken the matter too far, and her reason to save Iris was so ridiculous.
She is the daughter of the wicked Alpha.
Other people chimed in. If it was not for what Hannah had done to them in the past and how they respected and loved her, they wouldn't care if she was being the target of their rocks, or even if she got hurt. Hannah turned her head around and glared daggers at that person.
She is not like her father.
Hannah had screamed this sentence over and over again, but they chose to turn deaf ears. She was hurt beyond words for their actions.
How can you all do this to her? She is not like her father. Did she ever hurt you?
All of them turned their heads away, trying to avert her fierce glare. This was something that they didn't expect from Hannah, to scream and reprimand them like this.
Tell me what she had done to you. Did she ever hurt you in any way?
Hannah screamed out loud, disregarding the fact that her throat was hurt so badly.
She never hurt anyone. How many times do I have to tell you about this? If your hatred is so great that you turned a blind eye to everything else, or is it your hearts that have turned blind?
A few of them looked uncomfortable with what Hannah said. However, Hannah was not yet done with them. She glared at all of them, her eyes red with anger and sadness for her dear Missy.
All the help that you got from me had come from her. All the help from me had come from this woman that you stoned. How dare you hurt her?
She screamed at them. She couldn't hold this back any longer.
She gave you the food and medicine that you needed.
Every time they thanked her and expressed their gratitude, she wanted to say that it was not her that they should be grateful for, but she couldn't, and that ate her alive. Especially when these people looked at Iris with so much hatred for something that she didn't even do.
No, that's not possible. You're lying.
One voice said.
You can't give credit to her just because you care for her.
Another added.
You're too kind, Hannah. You don't need to lie to save her life.
Hannah's heart ached at their denial as she looked at them one by one. These people here were the members of the Howling Wolf pack who had not yet returned to their land because the economy there was so bad after 10 years of slavery, they couldn't do trade to sustain their life. Therefore, until things had settled down in the Howling Wolf pack, they chose to stay in the Blue Moon pack, blending with the pack members here. But it was not like the Blue Moon pack members could avoid misery either. The Alpha would find fault with them every now and then and collected high taxes. They would end up as slaves if they couldn't pay it. No different from the Howling Wolf pack members' fate.
Have you ever wondered why it was always possible for me to send you large amounts of food most of the days? Have you ever asked yourself why you could eat meat during those days?
Hannah whirled around to look at all of them because they surrounded her.
How my friends and I can give you such treats?
Hannah shook her head stubbornly. She clenched her fists, preventing herself from crying out loud. She felt like she wanted to rip her chest. Hannah didn't feel bad when she watched how these monsters looked uncomfortable with what she said. They should know. They must know who they had hurt. Hannah then turned around and pointed her finger at Iris, who was curling her body on the ground, whimpering in pain.
It was her order to spare the food for you, to steal the medicine for you.
As a shifter, it was their nature to be a meat eater, and for them to lack their main staple food, it would make them grow weak and fall easily sick. But thanks to the food that Hannah brought to them, they were not that much miserable.
Step forward, anyone who has been hurt by her.
Hannah looked at them one by one.
I will help you stone her if there is anyone that can prove it to me that she had hurt you. Step forward.
Episode 63.
She is not breathing.
Step forward, anyone who has been hurt by her.
Hannah looked at them one by one.
I will help you stone her if there is anyone that can prove it to me that she had hurt you. Step forward.
Why didn't she help us in the beginning?
There was this sudden question among the crowd. Hannah turned around and came face to face with a young man around the same age as Will. Hannah felt her heart would burst into pieces. She was overwhelmed with this emotion. She wanted them to understand. She wanted them to know what Iris had done for them desperately. She was afraid that her words would not be clear enough and they would turn deaf ears again. But she kept speaking what was in her mind. She stopped thinking and kept speaking whatever that came to her mind. She knew how much you had suffered at the hands of her father and brother. She was only 10 years old when you were enslaved by Alpha Gerald. What can a 10-year-old girl do for you? That was right. Iris was only 10 years old when they became slaves in the Blue Moon Pack. Just like what you have heard, everyone knows how much Alpha Gerald hated her because she was born as a runt. Everyone in the crowd visibly lowered their head. Hannah was right. It was not even a secret that Alpha Gerald and Mason didn't like her because she was a useless runt, and she rarely made an appearance because the two of them were ashamed of her. And then, Hannah made a sudden move that they didn't expect at all, leaving them speechless. Crying, Hannah ripped the back of her dress and showed something to everyone present there: the ghastly scars on her back. Though her body was covered in blood now, all of them could see the horrible state of her back, something that they couldn't even imagine at all. Look at this. Look at what her brother had done to her. Hannah stood up and threw a vicious glare at them. She looked like she was going to shift and attack them all. Look at this clearly and tell me that she had not suffered under their cruelty. A loud gasp rippled among the onlookers. Most of the women could only look at Iris's back once, and they didn't have the heart to look at her twice. They felt shameful. She got beaten up every time she got caught trying to feed you all and steal medicine. She was whipped for that. And here you are, stoning her to death? How dare you? You should be ashamed of yourself. You are the monsters. Hannah screamed painfully until she was hyperventilating. Even monsters will know how to thank the person that helped them. These feelings were too much for her. The crowd grew silent as the women started to cry, while the men could only clench their fists. It was not only them that had suffered. It was not Iris's fault, whatever that had happened to them, and she had never done anything to harm them. They couldn't imagine someone hurting their own flesh and blood like Alpha Gerald and Mason. Both of them should be left to rot in hell. They felt ashamed. And the fact that all of them have been helped by Iris through Hannah made it even worse. Guilty feelings started to creep into their hearts. If Iris had been beaten and whipped because she had helped them, it meant every scar on her body was because of them, while it was true for her new wounds after what they had done. Not even once. Not even once did she hurt you. Not even once did she agree with what her father and brother had done to you. Hannah balled her hands into tight fists. She needed to control herself because she didn't want to cry now. She must let them know the truth first. Step forward, whoever thinks she has harmed you. I will help you stone her if it's true. She dared to say this because she knew 100% that Iris had never done anything to them. How could she do something when she was barely out of her bedroom, except for sneaking out at night occasionally? Do you really think her father and brother hated her just because she was born a runt? They excluded her because she is nothing like them. Her brother would whip her every time he found out that she sneaked around to prepare food for you. He had beaten her whenever he found out what she had done. Did she stop though? No, she never stopped doing that. Even when her back was bleeding from all the whipping, she didn't think of stopping. Iris knew that her brother wouldn't kill her. No matter how much her father didn't care about her, she was still his daughter, and she still had some value. It was always Mason who would punish her by beating and whipping her, while Alpha Gerald didn't care much as long as she didn't die. She saved me when I was nothing but a slave. Hannah shook her head. No, even a slave still had a higher rank than me at that time. I was being tortured to death, but she saved me. She kept me by her side. She remembered how little Iris rushed toward the people that were beating her and pushed them away from her. Thankfully, the guards that came with her were able to bring them out of the chaos alive. It was her fortune, because that happened on a rare occasion when Iris was allowed to step out of the pack house. Hannah had been beaten, about to be sold as a sex slave because her parents left so much debt, since the tax was so high in this pack. Both of her parents died, and she was alone. She thought that would be her life from then, but no, Iris came to save her. Hannah was 15 at that time.
She is not a monster. She is not evil like her father and brother. She is nothing like her father and brother.
Hannah felt so tired to tell them this. All of them looked regretful. So did the guards, who didn't do anything and just watched what they had done to Iris. However, Hannah didn't care about their regrets. It was not her that they had to feel sorry for or apologize sincerely. Hannah's eyes then landed on Grace, the healer who had been treating Iris so coldly. Before, Hannah wouldn't even raise her voice when Grace treated Iris half-heartedly. She would accept that because her dearest Missy never wanted to raise a conflict by talking about what she had done for them. But not anymore. Hannah's cold eyes were enough to make the hell freeze over.
You, Grace.
The healer flinched when Hannah called her out. She was standing among the crowd. Yes, she didn't participate in stoning Iris, but she didn't do anything to help either when she could have prevented this from happening.
Do you really think because you are a healer that Alpha Gerald spared you? If it was not for Miss Iris, who put the idea of taking you in the head healer's head, in hopes that you'll be able to help your people, you would have ended up in a much worse fate than that beautiful face of yours.
Yes, during that time, having a beautiful face was a curse. You will have to go through the unimaginable because of your face. And Grace was so beautiful and young, a combination that would make the Alpha and his son salivate over her.
Miss Iris did everything to convince her teacher and the head healer to take you in. Have you ever wondered for even once how you can end up as a healer when you are so young to be recognized as a useful healer? They didn't need you. You are not a genius that will only appear once in 100 years.
Hannah knew that her words were harsh and she shouldn't speak that way, but then she couldn't help it when she remembered how she had treated Iris, as if she was a nuisance and didn't deserve to be saved. Grace fiddled with her fingers when she heard that. She lowered her head in shame. But then she came forward and approached Iris's battered body and started to cast healing magic on her to stop the bleeding. She couldn't do much with her healing power. As a runt, Iris didn't respond to this magic. They needed to heal her in a conventional way. We need to get her treated immediately. Grace stuttered. She was so ashamed of herself, while Hannah broke down crying even more. She didn't even dare to touch Iris. She was afraid that she would hurt her even more. On the other hand, Will was so stunned to hear all this revelation. But then he snapped out of it and crouched down to carry Iris. He did that ever so gently, but even so, Iris still whimpered in pain, breathing raggedly. Afterward, he rushed toward Iris's bedroom. His head was spinning after hearing what Hannah had said. Everything made more sense now. How could a servant like Hannah have access to the feasts that they had? Meat and medicine were two heavenly things that could soothe their misery. Will ran as fast as he could, while Hannah and Grace followed behind him, leaving the crowd, who were sobbing, regretting their mistakes over how they had hurt the person that had helped them. All of them felt so remorseful, especially those who had stoned, beaten, and kicked Iris mercilessly, though she had pleaded with them to stop. However, Hannah didn't care about what they were feeling right now, because the only important thing to her was Iris's well-being. Ami forced herself to push back her pain, and in a halting, tearful voice, she relayed everything that had transpired to the Alpha. Beside the Alpha were Jace and Ethan. Both of them were stunned and unable to speak. Their minds reeled with the facts Ami and Grilla presented to them. Of course, they had also eaten the meat, and were very grateful for the medicine that Hannah and her friends had brought to them.
Impossible.
Ethan frowned so hard.
Where is she?
Kane stood up from his seat as he walked toward the door. His expression was impassive, but there was a flicker of emotion in his dark eyes.
She is in her room. Grace and a few healers are trying to help her.
Grilla reported to him. She felt even more remorseful and awful than Ami. because she was the one who stopped her from preventing that from happening. On the other hand, Ami was beating herself up for not being more vocal and stepping forward when she could still prevent it. Both old ladies cried silently. They were so ashamed. Grilla remembered how eager Iris was to help the victims, while she was suspicious of her intentions, when her heart was so pure. Hannah was right. They were the monsters. Their hearts were so blinded by anger and hatred. Even now, there was not a single memory that she could recall where Iris hurt them. Even if you asked around, no one would be able to say anything bad about Iris, because there was nothing like that. All of that was only in their minds. Their minds were so clouded by what Elpha Gerald and Mason had done, so they looked at Iris in their shadow. When Cain arrived at Iris's bedroom, he saw Grace and Ardent, the head healer. He was an old man who had retired, but Grace still asked him to come over, since Iris's condition was too severe and she couldn't use her healing magic. Ardent gave instructions to the other two healers to start looking for herbs that could help treat Iris's injuries, while Grace still tried to stop her bleeding. "Oh no!" Grace gasped as she started panicking. "She's not breathing!" Ardent immediately took Iris's other hand and used his healing magic, but Iris's body rejected that kind of magic.
Episode 64.
I will not give my loyalty to you. "Oh no!" Grace gasped as she started panicking. "She is not breathing!" On the other hand, Hannah was crying. She sat down in a corner of the room, hugging herself. She couldn't stop crying no matter what. Ami and Grilla approached her to console her, yet she was inconsolable right now. "Please, please save her," Hannah whimpered, with her eyes fixed on Iris's bloodied face. No, they said she was not breathing now.
This will not do.
Ardent mumbled. He narrowed his eyes.
I can't get her.
Ardent and Grace tried their best to make Iris start breathing again, but to no avail. Her body was still warm, and her heart was still beating, only it grew weaker by the minute. "Grace!" Grace could only let go of Iris's hand as she started to blow air into her mouth before proceeding to do chest compressions, because she knew healing magic could only do so much to help Iris. She was so desperate to make Iris breathe again, as if her life was hanging on a thread. She wouldn't be able to live her life without apologizing to her and thanking her for everything that she had done. She herself saw the whipping marks on her back the last time she treated her. Thus, she could imagine what kind of pain that she had to go through when Iris helped them. They hated her so much without knowing about it.
People are still trying to know what happened to her.
Ethan said, as he stared at Iris's sleeping face.
They won't stop coming to wish her well either.
Word traveled fast about what had transpired 10 days ago, about what Iris, the wicked Elfa's daughter, had done for them, and what she had to go through in their hands because she had helped them. But the ultimate blow to them was the ghastly scars on her back. Those people who were not there to hear what Hannah said directly or see Iris's scars found out about everything she did and showed their gratitude toward Iris. They prayed for her and asked the guards daily about her recovery. Jace and Ethan, also all the people in the pack house, were so surprised to see how those people's hearts changed. They went from hating her being their Luna to now cherishing her. They were actually elated at the fact of her being their Alpha's mate. They went as far as saying that she was their Alpha's second chance mate, that they were destined to be together, and it was fate. Cain didn't respond to that in any way. However, he came to visit Iris in her room every day for the past 10 days. Grace and Ardent managed to make her breathe again, but the injuries that she sustained were too severe, and because Iris's body was not very responsive to healing power, they couldn't heal her fast enough. They needed to do it conventionally.
Have they found the herbs that Ardent asked for?
Cain asked Hannah, who was standing next to Iris's bed. She would be here for 24 hours and wouldn't leave Iris's side if it was not necessary. She would make sure that Iris got her medicine on time and wiped her body, She would inform Grace immediately if Iris got a fever.
No, they're still looking for them.
Hannah replied in a sad voice. She looked haggard, because there was nothing that Ami or Grilla could say to make her take some rest, as she didn't want anyone to take care of Iris, as though she didn't believe them. After what happened, her feelings were valid. It was painful to see how everything had to turn out like this, and now they missed Hannah's smile. Nowadays, she didn't even smile, nor did she want to greet anyone that she saw. She was still angry about what they had done to Iris, and this made all the people become even more remorseful, including those who didn't participate in hurting Iris.
Tell me if you need anything.
Kane said curtly, and Hannah bowed her head respectfully before the Alpha walked out of the bedroom with Ethan following behind him.
Don't you want to meet with Arya?
Ethan asked when they were in the hallway. Kane wanted to look over the last day of the construction of the fort in the mining site.
She has been asking for you.
Moreover, Kane wanted to talk to Redmond. He was supposed to meet with the former warriors from the Blue Moon Pack sooner, but with everything that happened, it had been delayed.
I will see her when I want to see her.
Kane was always so cold, but from his answer, Ethan could say that the Alpha was thoroughly upset and disappointed by what the Mistress had done. Based on the report, it was the Mistress who had provoked people around the tents who were grieving over their loved ones to start attacking Iris. It was easy to instigate something like it because the seed of hatred was already there. Kane had already given her a warning when she tried to let those warriors defile Iris the last time, but it seemed Arya didn't take it seriously, and this was another thing why the Alpha had forbidden her from coming near him. He didn't allow her to come to his room, to the training grounds, or the mines. Those were the places that he frequently visited recently.
Adoran had arrived in the Celestial Moon Pack and met with Alpha Derek. The Alpha thanked you for the magic stones that you sent.
Ethan told him about the letter that he received this morning. They were inside the carriage that would take them to the mines.
Alpha Derek will help you in finding the best sorcerer around his place and lend them to you.
Kane nodded.
The Alpha is under the assumption that you will use the sorcerer to install a magical device to strengthen your defense against the monsters in Gaffa Mountain.
Ethan said. Both of them had the same problem with the monsters, though in Celestial Moon Pack, the monsters were more aggressive than here. That was also why they needed assistance from a sorcerer.
Do you think it will work?
Ethan knew about the problem that Kane was facing, and Grace had told him about it with the Alpha's permission, but he didn't think an offensive or defensive sorcerer would be the right person for Kane to ask for a solution regarding his problem. Kane said nothing, but his eyes were fixed on something in the distance. He needed to think of a solution as to what he should do if that did not work, if he couldn't produce an heir. How could he impregnate someone when he was sterile? 2 years. Within 2 years, Iris should be pregnant with a baby. They arrived at the mines, and Stone immediately greeted the Alpha and the Gamma as he walked them to the fortress. He told the Alpha that the repairs had been finished, and now the fortress was strong enough to hold back an attack more massive than last time.
Do you know the reason why the fortress broke down?
Kane asked as he walked on top of the fortress to look over the entire Gopher Mountain. He could spot a few monsters, and judging from it, it seemed he needed to hold a monster hunt within the next month.
From what I learned, it seemed there was something big or heavy that had collided with our fortress.
Stone explained his reason why he thought that way.
Which side did the force come from?
Pardon me?
From which side the force that broke down the fortress came from?
With that question, Stone seemed to realize it.
It was from inside.
He tried to recall and could tell that the force came from inside. Kane and Ethan met each other's eyes in understanding for a brief moment. Adoran had told them that the king had put someone inside the pack, and now they knew that this someone was not only a spy that would just report back everything to the king, but also someone who would cause trouble inside this pack. They needed to find out who it was before this person caused more casualties within the pack.
I want you to investigate that.
And after that, Kane looked around the fortress once again before he requested for Stone to lead the way to Redmond, with whom he needed to finish a long overdue conversation. The former warrior was working in the mines, and after they managed to dig 45 magic stones to fulfill the quota to satisfy the merchant with Iris's help, they were barely able to find 2 more. It still stunned Stone to see that Iris could do something like that, a power that they had never known about.
There, the red-haired guy. It's Redmond.
Stone pointed to a man from afar, while one of Stone's men went over to him and informed him that the Alpha wanted to see him. The red-haired guy named Redmond glanced at Kane, who was walking in his direction. He grumbled something inaudible and threw his shovel away before approaching Kane.
I don't need to bow to you, do I? After all, I never pledged my loyalty to you, so you're not the Alpha for me.
Redmond spoke with so much audacity.
No, I am not the Alpha for you. I am your master, and you are my slave.
Redmond didn't like it. If he could, he would shift into his beast and attack Kane there and then. But that was not going to happen, since all of them here had been forced to drink rotting bane leaves, which rendered them unable to shift into their beasts. The same thing that Alpha Gerald had used on all of his slaves. You would need at least a cup of rotting bane leaves in order for you to not be able to shift for 3 to 4 days. It was a strong poison for a shifter, though it wouldn't kill them.
Now, tell me, what do you want to say?
Kane didn't even offer for him to sit somewhere to make this conversation more comfortable. He simply approached him to have this important conversation with him.
I want you to free the Blue Moon Pack.
Redmond said point blank.
I don't need to, because this is still the Blue Moon Pack, theoretically, since I didn't merge the 2 packs together yet.
Kane watched the red-haired man before him, and he started seething.
You have 2 choices. You can pledge your loyalty to me, or you can work in this mine until your last day in this life. I am fine with either of your choices.
Kane appeared nonchalant, as if he didn't need more reliable warriors to help him defend these 2 packs.
I want the third option.
Redmond said with a smirk. It seemed he had predicted what Kane's answer would be, and came up with an entirely different idea.
I don't remember offering you a third option.
Kane said in a light tone. He looked around leisurely and got a little bit of a flashback about when he worked on this site. It was not a pleasant memory to remember, but he couldn't help it. It came without him even being able to prevent it.
Nah, your 2 options didn't even sound good.
Redmond gave the Alpha a wolfish smirk. He folded his arms in front of his chest smugly, yet the Alpha didn't seem to be affected by his audacity. He still looked calm and hard to read. Kane said nothing. Thus Redmond took this as a cue for him to tell him what was in his mind.
I don't want to pledge my loyalty to the people from the Howling Wolf Pack. I just want to pledge my loyalty to the people of the Blue Moon Pack.
Redmond lifted his chin. Despite his situation right now, and the way his body was caked with dirt, he still stood tall and proud like the warrior he was.
I know what Alpha Gerald had done to your people was unfair.
Kane scoffed when he heard that. How people from Alpha Gerald's side always belittle the hellish days that his people had to go through in the hands of their Alpha was still unfathomable to him.
Episode 65.
I will let you go.
I don't want to pledge my loyalty to anyone from the Howling Wolf Pack. I just want to pledge my loyalty to someone from the Blue Moon Pack.
Redmond lifted his chin.
My loyalty is still with my pack. I will not pledge my loyalty to you, an Alpha from the Howling Wolf Pack.
Mason will never be an Alpha.
Kane cut straight to the point.
If you want to pledge your loyalty to him, go ahead. You can accompany him in the dungeon along with your minions.
For someone like Redmond, it would be better to go to labor than to be locked inside that damned place. Redmond hissed when he heard the way Kane called his comrades as minions, but he couldn't really retaliate right now.
I don't mean Mason.
Redmond said slowly.
You didn't merge the packs, which means the most eminent person in the Blue Moon pack right now is your mate, Miss Iris. I want her.
The way he said, "I want her," was really ambiguous and sounded inappropriate, as he wanted to get back at Kane for calling his fellow warriors minions. But, to his disappointment, Kane didn't look upset at all.
She is not in the condition to receive your loyalty. I will let her know whether she wants it or not when she wakes up.
Kane then turned around and walked away. He didn't really give Redmond a conclusion at all. Everyone must have known about Iris and what happened to her 10 days ago by now. Another day passed. It had been 10 days since that incident in the front yard, and from that day, Kane didn't allow her to come closer to his living quarters. It meant Arya couldn't go to his bedroom, nor could she go near Iris's bedroom, since their rooms were right next to each other's.
Damn it, that bitch.
Arya was exasperated because she really needed to talk to Kane. She wanted him to hear her side of the story, because she knew someone would have already let him know that she was the one who had instigated the people to begin with then. But she didn't even hurl a single rock in her direction. She didn't harm her. Yet why was she the one being punished? This was not fair. Arya paced back and forth inside her bedroom, while Dahlia was staring at her, standing next to Bean. They didn't know what to do to calm the mistress down. Her mood was getting worse by the day, while her being forbidden from going to the Alpha's living quarters only added fuel to her current problematic emotional state.
This will not do. This will not do.
Arya bit her nails, her habit whenever she was anxious.
It has been 10 days. It is even longer than the last time we were intimate.
Usually, it wouldn't take this long for Kane to call her over. To be honest, he had never called her. It was always Arya who would go and take care of his needs. She was the one who always took the initiative because she knew Kane's situation, where, once aroused, he must go through with the deed. That was only one among a dozen deranged things that were included in their arrangement after those abusive 10 years. It was not easy for Arya to seduce him, but then, usually he would give in to her, and before this, he had never banned her presence. He never got angry when she barged into his room without announcing it first either.
What should I do now?
Arya muttered to herself as she walked back and forth inside her bedroom.
What should I do now?
In the end, Arya decided to go to the training grounds the next morning. Since she knew he would be there, she decided to talk to him no matter what. She would beg, and not move from her place if she had to go to such lengths just to make Kane listen to her. And that was what she did. On the 11th day since Iris fell unconscious, Arya went to the training grounds, where the sound of vicious growls and roars shook the ground. The training ground in this Blue Moon pack was built like a huge stadium, with grandstand seats circling the center, where the spectators could have a good view from their seats. Arya easily spotted the Alpha, since he was in his black beast and stood out from the rest. She sat down and waited for him to finish with the training, but Will came to her first.
You can't be here.
Will said before he sat down next to her, watching the Alpha teach the young warriors how to fight in their beast form. It was great that the youngsters were willing to train to become warriors, since they really needed them now.
Why can't I be here?
Arya asked him back. Her mood immediately plummeted for being told the same thing over and over again. It seemed once she lost the Alpha's affection, nobody would respect her anymore.
The Alpha is busy.
I will not disturb him. I will wait until he is done with the training.
Arya said irritably.
I have been with him for 3 years now. I know how he is.
With Will questioning her, she felt a little bit annoyed.
And I have known him for more than 15 years, ever since I came to the Howling Wolf pack. I am his former mate's personal servant, after all.
Arya knew Leanne longer than Kane, because she originally followed her Missy around and was taken to the pack house to accompany Leanne when she found out that her mate was the son of the Alpha. Meanwhile, Will couldn't refute that. However, Arya missed the whole point here.
It is not that you can't see him forever. The Alpha only needs some time for himself.
Will tried to explain the situation gently.
There are a lot of things that he had to deal with now that we know there is a spy that the king had sent to trouble us.
He was used to talking about things like this with Arya, because despite everything that happened recently, they had gone through so much together. She used to be so close to the Alpha and his Gamma and Beta than any other pack member.
I know. I heard about that from Ethan.
Arya replied. Her eyes were fixed on the black beast, and for a brief second she felt like their eyes met. But probably it was only in her desperate mind.
Is she still unconscious?
Will knew who she was talking about.
Yes, her condition doesn't get worse, but it doesn't get any better either.
Inside, Arya cheered up a bit to hear such information. She didn't want Iris to wake up. If it was possible, she wanted her to stay like that forever. It would be great if she suffered brain death from the rocks that were hurled at her.
Does the Alpha go to visit her often?
Will was slightly uncomfortable to answer that, and Arya turned to look at him.
You can tell me anything you know. I am not an outsider.
Yes, the Alpha visits her almost every day.
Arya started seething when she heard that.
For what?
Her words came out harsher than she intended them to be, but she didn't care. She was extremely hurt now. Will sighed.
None of us know that Iris had been helping us out in the past with food, water, and especially with medicine.
The latest was not something that a slave like them would be able to get their hands on, since Alpha Gerald wouldn't be so generous to give them even a single herbal leaf.
Even though he didn't show it, he is very grateful for what Iris had done. Because of that, there are many people who survived the slavery.
So what if she did that?
Arya was irritated. She couldn't think rationally right now. People's hearts started to soften when they heard the name Iris now.
They are too weak to change their hearts so easily. Have they forgotten how their family members and their mates were killed during that time? The suffering and the abuse that we had to go through? Why did they easily forget about all of that?
Arya was furious. She balled her fists until her nails stabbed her palms.
Calm down, Arya.
Will was surprised to witness how Arya had changed a lot. When did she start to change? Or was she always like this?
They forget so easily,
she said through gritted teeth.
How could they forget that so many people had died?
You are right that many people had died during the slavery.
Will then looked Arya straight in the eyes. His eyes were filled with warmth and sadness when he spoke to her.
But you forgot those people who survived because of her help. A small act of kindness meant a lot to us. Even a drop of water or a piece of hard bread when we were starving was something that we used to be grateful for.
Will realized that Hannah was right when she said that their hatred had blinded them. On the other hand, Arya didn't share the same sentiment. She didn't like to hear that narrative.
I still won't forgive her.
Arya was adamant with her decision, and Will couldn't make her think otherwise. Probably she just needed a little bit of time. From afar, they could see the Alpha shifting into his human form and giving instructions about the fighting stance to those young men for a few minutes before he wrapped it up and walked towards the restroom at the other end of the stadium. Seeing that, Arya immediately stood up and was about to follow Cain when Will stopped her, grabbing her wrist.
No, Arya. The Alpha said he didn't want you near him for a while.
Will still remembered the order that was given to him, and because this was a direct order from the Alpha, he was obliged to follow. But Arya was not happy to hear that. She tried to swat his hand away, but his grip was too tight.
Let me go,
she hissed viciously. She looked like she would fight off Will if he didn't let her go to see the Alpha. Yet, Will didn't budge. He looked at her apologetically, but an order was an order. However, Right at that time, a young boy came up to them. He was around 13 or 14 years old.
Miss Arya, the Alpha is waiting for you in the restroom.
He said. He was one of the newly recruited warriors. Arya smiled so brightly when she heard that, and immediately pointed at Will's hand that was still clutching her wrist.
Let me go now.
Since the Alpha was the one who asked for her presence, Will didn't have any other reason to tell her otherwise. Once he let go of her hand, Arya immediately bolted toward the restroom to meet with Cain. She was excited, but also nervous because the Alpha was very unpredictable.
Cain?
Arya entered the restroom and found Cain pouring down water on his head to get rid of his sweat. He was only wearing his pants, so his naked, broad back was facing her. It had been so long since the last time Arya saw him up close like this, and she yearned for him so much. She had this urge to run her fingers on his shoulder blades, but she had to curb it for now, since she knew Cain wouldn't like to be touched that way. Especially when he was upset with her like this. He wouldn't appreciate such advances.
Cain, I really miss you.
Arya said, her voice cracked. She truly missed him. She didn't know when she saw him as a man rather than a master or someone that she had to respect and follow. She had blind faith in him. Now she was overwhelmed by her feelings for him. She wanted him just for herself, despite knowing she couldn't be the Luna for him. Cain turned around and put down the empty jar on the table. This room was not small. The walls were made of rough stones that supported the tribunal above them, while the ground was not tiled.
Cain?
Arya took a step closer toward him.
You got your feelings mixed up.
That was not a question, but a statement. Arya stopped approaching him when she saw how cold his eyes were.
What is so wrong with loving you?
The question came as a whisper. Cain looked at her with eyes that almost looked sad.
I don't need love, Arya. Your feelings only complicate things. I want you to get rid of them.
This was not what they agreed on before.
Cain, I've known you for a long time. I don't believe that you don't have any feelings for me.
Arya was almost crying to hear the rejection outright. But then, what else did she expect from him when Cain had made it very clear to her from the beginning?
Arya, you are important to me, just like Jace, Ethan, and Emmy.
Those were the people that he cherished the most, as they would give up their lives for him, and they had proven it over and over again. So did Arya.
But this is not something that I wish for us. This is not something that will benefit the pack, and I have to let you go if you act out again.
Arya staggered.
What do you mean you will let me go?